The city that has the best collection of early Christian mosaics of the 5th century and early Byzantine mosaics of the 6th century is Ravenna in Italy. And we're going to look first at the 5th century mosaics in the Mausoleum of Galla Placidia, so-called, and then we will be looking at some 6th century mosaics in other churches. First, a little history. In 395, Theodosius I redivided the empire into the Eastern and Western empires. The capital of the East remained Constantinople, but as Rome was attacked by the barbarians, Rome was eventually abandoned, and the capital of the West became Milan. In 402, the Visigoths besieged Milan, and the emperor Honorius, who was the son of Theodosius, moved the capital of the West from Milan to Ravenna. So Ravenna now is the capital of the Western Empire. In 409, the Visigoths under Alaric sacked Rome, and they took Galla Placidia hostage. Galla Placidia was the sister of the emperor. She obviously didn't remain hostage. She became the regent of the emperor. She became the regent of the empire. In 423, Honorius died without a son. His dynastic heir was Valentinian from 419 to 55, the son of Honorius's half-sister, Galla Placidia. And Galla Placidia was also the daughter of Theodosius I. In 423 to 425, the usurper John, took power until he was overthrown and executed. And in 425, Valentinian, who was then 6 years old, was installed as the emperor of the West. Well, at 6 years old, he can't really rule. And so his mother, Galla Placidia, acted as regent for 18 years. And then, of course, in 476, the Western Roman Empire fell when the Italian peninsula lost to Odoacer. After the Roman Empire fell, and there were no more emperors, it became the kingdom of the Ostrogoths. In 493, Theodoric the Great, whose dates are 454 to 526, Theodoric the Great was the king of the Ostrogoths. He became king of the Ostrogoths between 471 and 526. And he conquered Ravenna, and he conquered Italy, ostensibly as a viceroy for the Roman emperor. But as it really worked out, he was setting up the kingdom of the Ostrogoths in Italy. And he ruled Italy from 493 to 526. In 526, Theodoric's daughter, see if I can pronounce her name, Amalasuntha, became the regent queen of the Goths for her minor son, Athalaric, and then he died in 534. His mother rules with her cousin, Theodahad, who had her imprisoned and murdered in 535. In 535, Belisarius, who was the very famous general for the Eastern Emperor Justinian, Belisarius conquers Ravenna and restores Italy to the empire, which is now the Byzantine Empire. Now, we're going to look at this really beautiful little building, which is known today as the Mausoleum of Galla Placidia in Ravenna. It's believed to date from about 425 to 450, the erection of the building. Galla Placidia had the Church of Santa Croce, the Church of the Holy Cross, built next to the imperial palace. Unfortunately, neither one survives, neither the Church of Santa Croce nor the imperial palace. However, this building was originally the Chapel of St. Lawrence, attached to or adjacent to the Church of the Holy Cross. And we'll see when we look inside that he is depicted in the lunette opposite the entrance. It was converted to a mausoleum that contains 3 tombs, which we'll see. Traditionally, maybe not accurately, but traditionally, those tombs were supposed to be Galla Placidia, either Honorius or Valentinian, and Constantius the second, who was Galla Placidia's husband and her son's father. However, although this was certainly believed to be true in the Renaissance and beyond, there is considerable doubt that Galla Placidia, who died in Rome, was actually buried there. In any case, it could be the Mausoleum of Galla Placidia because of patronage, that she would have been the patron of this beautiful little building. First, we're going to look at the architecture and then at the interior. Now, one thing you have to understand about the architecture is that the ground line has risen. When you step into the building, you step down a step. So that these blind arcades, these arches that you see here, would be a little longer, and the proportions would be a little bit different. Looks a little stubby on the lower level, but that's because the ground level has risen. This building is a Greek cross plan, which means it's a centralized building with cross arms of equal length. And it was probably influenced by the Church of the Holy Apostles in Constantinople. The Church of the Holy Apostles was a Greek cross plan church with 5 domes. This only has 1 dome, as we'll see. And the Church of the Holy Apostles was believed to have been founded by Justinian on the site of the Constantinian Church of the Holy Apostles. And Constantine had this church built as his burial site. Constantine was buried, and he was considered himself to be the 13th apostle. Now, that being a Constantinian foundation, a Justinianic rebuilding, and the tomb of Constantine, it was very influential on other buildings. The cross shape is appropriate because it is next to the imperial church of Santa Croce, and it may have served as a mausoleum for the empress or certainly for someone else. On the exterior, we see blind arcades. These are arches that are filled in. You see these little narrow windows which are covered with alabaster, which is a translucent stone. So it lets a little bit of light in, but it's pretty dark inside. And you'll notice that this is built of brick. The architecture from Ravenna and usually the architecture from Milan at this time is usually built with long bricks. And see this with other buildings in Ravenna. Now, when we go inside, you can see that the cross arms are vaults. They are barrel vaults. They're covered with mosaics. The ceiling is covered with mosaics. The lower level, they have beautiful stonework, marbles, and then the upper level is just covered with these beautiful, beautiful 5th century mosaics. You have barrel vaults. You have lunettes at the end of the vaults. And it goes up to a, let me see, it goes up to a center lantern tower, which is also covered with mosaics. And here you can see that some of these mosaics are just these beautiful decorative pattern, Greek keys, things that look like elaborate. Are they stars? Are they flowers? Are they giant snowflakes? They can be both a floral and a star motif together. It's just exquisite. And I'm wearing my Galla Placidia scarf today. Over the vaults, we see this star pattern on the blue ground, and a very colorful Greek key design. And if we look at the lunette that is opposite the door, we see the dedicatory saint, Saint Lawrence. Remember that this mausoleum was originally dedicated as a chapel of Saint Lawrence. And so we see this. He was a martyred saint. He's carrying a cross. In the center, this is his grill with all of this fire underneath. He was martyred by being grilled alive. And then we see opposite the saint, here over on the left, we see a book press, a bookcase with the doors, a cabinet, and within it are the 4 Gospels. Probably the most famous of the mosaics that are here. It is exquisitely beautiful. Is the mosaic that is over the doorway. You know, when you come in, you have to turn around to see this. And as you're leaving, when this was a chapel, this is what you would see over the doorway. It is a mosaic of the Good Shepherd, a scene that we already know very much. It's a scene that we already are very familiar with from early Christian art. But there's some really interesting things, both stylistically and iconographically, about this. Here, the Good Shepherd is portrayed as royalty. He wears gold and purple garments. And he holds the great cross, almost as though it were a scepter. So we're seeing here Christ not only as the Good Shepherd, but Christ as the King of Kings. Now, he's surrounded with a landscape and 6 sheep, which we'll take a closer look at. What is so interesting about the style is that this is a transition between early Christian classical illusionism and Byzantine abstraction. So, for example, you see the landscape, which does seem to go back into depth. And yet, you see abstraction on the rock patterns in the foreground, this edge of the cliff. We sometimes talk about Byzantine iceberg rocks. They do seem to be a pattern. Yeah. And then we take a little closer look at the Good Shepherd. The Good Shepherd has this illusionistic contrapposto. So then when we look at the Good Shepherd, we see that there is an illusionistic contrapposto, the natural twist to the body. At the same time, if you look closely, you can see that there is a great deal of abstract linearity. There's a very hard line that surrounds the figure. And the drapery folds are defined perhaps more by line than by shading from different, all different shades of the color to make it seem more like a real drapery to wrap the arm. So it's a transition. You can see elements that are both illusionistic and abstract. And then let's look at the flocks of sheep. These fascinate me. The poses, the way the figures turn, the way they are slightly foreshortened, for example. This is very illusionistic. The shape shows someone who seems to have been looking at or knows a model that's been looking at sheep, and they seem to be very, very three-dimensional. They're shaded. But then if you look closer, you can see that there's a pattern on all of their fleece. And it really looks like a chevron pattern, and it's very hard-edged. almost like these little points coming around and wrapping the body. So you have the abstraction of this chevron pattern. The lunettes on the sides both show scenes of stags drinking from a pool. And these are the stags drinking the living waters. So you see the mosaic of the stags drinking from a pool. They're drinking the living waters. And this is a reference to Psalm 42, verse 1. As the hart panteth after the fountains of water, so my soul panteth after thee, O God, which refers to the soul's thirst for God, the longing for God. The stag, the hart, the deer, then becomes a symbol of the soul. And this is not new. Here we have one of the earliest Christian catacombs. And here is just a very small deer-like image, presumably a hart or a stag, near a tree. It's actually built up. I think it's built up in stucco, and it's right adjacent to, but facing the opposite direction from an image of the Madonna and Child. You can just see the head here, which I've kind of cut off so you can see the similarity. So here we're going clear back to the late 3rd or the 4th century with this stag motif. Then we look up into the central dome, and my image is a little dark. I apologize. It's, as I say, it's dark in there. When my class and I went to the Mausoleum of Galla Placidia, we actually asked them to shut the door for a minute because we wanted to see how much light was getting in. It was completely dark. The light mostly comes in through the doorway and then a little bit through these windows, which are covered with alabaster. And so it's translucent, but doesn't allow a lot of light in. So as you're looking up here to the central dome, you're seeing the stars on the blue sky. And then there's a cross in the center. And the corners, you see the symbols of the 4 evangelists, the tetramorph, or the 4 living creatures. And here, I'll show you a detail of the living creature that is the lion of St. Mark. And here you're seeing it in relationship to the images that are on the upper part of the wall. Above the lunettes and below the dome, you have images of the prophets or the apostles. And between them, one of the most beloved motifs in the Mausoleum of Galla Placidia, you have these little doves and a water dish. It's a little still life motif. And of course, the dove might represent the Holy Spirit, but since there's several of them, maybe they're more likely to represent the souls of mankind thirsting for the living waters. But they are just this lovely motif, which has an ancestor, if you will, in Roman mosaics. So here we see these Roman mosaics, which are still lifes of doves with a water vessel, and here you can see the doves from the Mausoleum of Galla Placidia in somewhat richer, beautiful blue colors. So once again, we're seeing how secular art could be adapted to Christian use, and that the doves probably are a symbol of the soul. Compared to the Roman mosaic, the illusionism is somewhat simplified. It's still illusionistic that they seem to be three-dimensional, but with less shading, less detail. And so in a sense, you do see this transition toward abstraction that we've been talking about.